All right, so part two in the conversation with Mike Burns and Bill Bernhardt. Please continue.
Thank you for the opportunity to continue. I was busy telling you about the Vian Commission, and the decisions were eventually based on democratic lines. Within the report, the opposing views were also captured, but in line with proper democratic principles, where the majority felt strongly about something, those were the ideas that were put forward to government.
Okay.
Emanating from that, we started developing a situation where the provinces, we've got a country where we've got 9 provinces. There is a certain amount of autonomy. There's a National Council of Provinces, which is a secondary parliamentary tier, which have certain rights within the governmental structures to govern their own provinces to a certain degree. Although in terms of the National Assembly, the national government under the current majority, the African National Congress, also known as the ANC, they pull the strings from the top down.
Okay.
The report suggested that we should legalize casinos. Racing should be allowed to continue. We've got bookmakers.
But at the time, you were already operating in a casino, right? So
yes.
The question was to whether the Kersner Casino, for example, would be allowed to continue, or if gambling would take on some other form, right?
That's right. I think
so
when we became a democracy, all of those independent little states that were created by the regime were brought back into the democratic South African environment. These casinos already existed and had already created thousands and thousands of jobs, and were very important to those areas where they were situated, because they were not necessarily situated in the metropolitan areas. So it created jobs for people that would otherwise have probably worked on farms or been involved in the farming industry, or been unemployed. So it created a whole new niche market. But when we became a democracy, in order to diminish the illegal gambling operators that had found their way into the metropolitan areas, into the bigger cities and towns, it was felt that casinos should be built in those areas. Our country took a decision to have a maximum of 40 casinos. This is going back now 16 years or so. We have not yet reached that level. We're on about 37. We've got 1 or 2 licenses that have been issued, but the casinos have not yet been built. The reason for that is some of the zones, each province, when they had the right to have casinos, they subdivided their province into zones, that the casinos would not be a threat to one another, that there was the opportunity for each of them to succeed, and that the entertainment that was being offered there, not purely gambling, the entertainment offered would be spread geographically between within the province, and then within the republic itself, the Republic of South Africa as we know it. We've always had the sports books and the pari-mutuel betting and things like that. We've had bingo, although very limited success. Although it has become slightly more popular with the advent of the electronic bingo terminals.
Well, speaking of electronic, what about online gaming? Were you to look into the future? Do you think this is something that South Africa is going to be involved with in the next few years? Do you see this as the future?
I'd like to think it would be, but obviously everything will be determined by our government. We have pointed out the pitfalls. We have pointed out the need for online gambling. And it's not about taxes, it's not even about jobs, because we were never going to be open. We were never going to be an open environment where anyone could set up an online gambling portal or an online gambling site and start trading. We were going to, in essence, copy the Gibraltars and even the Antigua Barbudan type strategy, where we wanted the best and most reputable online gambling operators within the world to come into our environment. One, to offer it to our citizens and anyone else from around the world that wishes to gamble into a well-regulated environment where return to punter is set in law, regulation, and which includes the enforcement of debts, forms part of the legislation. The games are vetted and approved before the time. We've got technical standards against which those games and or devices are tested and certified. And you know that the people behind the scenes, the operators, are all fit and proper.
Right.
None have a tainted background or come from...
Which is difficult in online because there are some shady operators out there.
That's right. I'd like to believe, however, that we don't live in a world of Vegas in the 1920s and 30s with the Bugsy Malones of this world any longer. And I think a regulation in that regard has come.
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's gone full circle.
It's
gone full circle. I'd just like to add that our government insisted that we had a gambling review commission set up under the auspices of the Department of Trade and Industry. They were to look at gambling, where we were, how we've evolved, and some of the challenges we face today. Virtual racing comes to mind. Person-to-person betting exchanges. Farfetch, which I mentioned to you. And there are one or two other different types of phenomena, which SMS wagering, downloading the games to your mobile phone, for example. All of those issues. They made their own set of recommendations. They interacted with the whole of South Africa at large and went around getting opinions internationally. The recommendations need to be considered by government. It doesn't mean they have to adopt it.
This is kind of a big evaluation moment.
Oh, very big.
South
very
African.
big.
I know a number of our colleagues are being called in front of Parliament to explain the industry to the national government, right? So it's really sort of a big evaluation moment.
It is indeed a very big. I don't want to preempt what government will decide.
Right.
We have pointed out, for example, I forgot to mention online gambling that is considered and commented on there.
Okay.
All we've attempted to do is point out that there's an estimated outflow of, in the region of $400 million, i.e. in the region of 300 billion rand, 3 billion rand, I'm terribly sorry, of money flowing out of our country, where our citizens are, with the use of their credit cards and or debit cards, are playing online gambling. We want to alert our government to that. They may turn around and say, well, you've got to prohibit that.
Right.
I think we're going to have to then be very creative, because we are talking...
It's a difficult thing to regulate.
I think we're talking in the region of a figure of about 500,000 people. Right. We're a country of between 45 and 49 million. We're having a census done as we speak. In fact, it finished last night. And if we're talking 500,000, we're not talking an awfully large amount of people. Right. But those are people with credit cards and debit cards. Those are people with good credit and a large amount of disposable income.
Sure.
And we're seeing that
upper
money
class
flow.
slice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the middle to upper class, including a new middle and upper class black African. And so we have to consider very carefully what we want to do. We don't want to, I certainly don't want to be seen to hold my government to ransom by saying, we've got this situation on the one side, we better do it. But I think it is something they need to take very, very seriously. But I'm also a disciplined regulator, and I follow the rule of law, and what my government tells me, I will follow.
Okay, very nice. Well, the one final question that clearly would be of interest to, say, a United States-based university group,
yes,
is you've obviously seen this gaming industry go from pre-apartheid to post-apartheid.
Yes.
You're obviously one of the white leaders of a very dynamic industry, and I've also heard you deliver a very articulate and impassioned plea for this industry to do better, hiring persons of color, particularly the Black South African community. We were speaking to that the other day in our class, and I thought it was brilliant. Do you mind sort of sharing your perspectives on this? Again, it's something that I think the United States students would love to hear about from a white South African in the new South Africa. You have a very unique perspective on all this, Mike Burns. We'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, Bo, I'd like to share with the people. I've got a responsibility to my government. My responsibility has got nothing to do with skin color. What it has got to do with is corrective action. We've got a responsibility as all considerate South Africans to correct the imbalances of the past. That doesn't mean that people with a white skin color are going to be totally eliminated from within the market. But it is to correct the imbalances of the past. We've got a majority of 10-1. The casino operators made promises when they were licensed. I don't want to go into whether they've delivered. I think on the ownership front and many of the other areas, corporate social investment, preferential procurement, because we've got acts that govern all of that, I think there they've been very successful. When it comes to nurturing and growing the young Black African into the casino environment, right up to executive management, I think we failed to a certain degree. I think we as regulators need to take a bit of responsibility, because we had control over that in terms of the license conditions. Right. We must look into our own souls to see if what we have done actually meets the objectives of national government. I'm not entirely sure that we have met those requirements. And I think we at the National Gambling Board are in the process of developing a national framework together with our provincial colleagues and together with the industry to ensure that these imbalances are corrected in law. It could be very draconian if you're sitting on the outside in a free market society such as the US. But I think we've given people the opportunity, 15, 16 years, to nurture, to mentor, to grow the African youth, to bring them into that environment. And I'm of the opinion, together with many of my colleagues, that we should have seen within the organograms, within the structures of our casinos, a far larger percentage of young and middle-aged Black African men and women in executive and senior management levels. I don't want to dissect the entire gambling industry and say the racing industry did better than the casino industry or vice versa. I think from an ownership point of view, I think we may have achieved the correct mix, and in many instances our casino companies have majority Black ownership, which is what our government seeks to achieve. It doesn't eliminate the competition, and it doesn't eliminate white flag.
Right, right.